Welcome back to another intuitive chat, an intuitive chat where I share some of my experiences throughout my support work career and EFT tapping practitioner career that might help you in your growth towards recovering either from traumas or reducing stress in your everyday life. And you've probably noticed as well that there has been a reduction in some of the videos, and there's been nothing negative that's been happening to cause that. If anything, I've been kind of enjoying life. I've got a really great crew of support clients, and their parents are really awesome. So it's kind of like just an enjoyable period of life where I'm sort of just slowing down and just like that saying, stopping and smelling the roses, appreciating sort of the life that I have and just sort of the people in it, and also just being able to do things like make my house a home. I've recently just got a new bed frame, which really improved my sleep. So now I'm no longer sleeping in till 5 a.m. in the morning. I'm actually sleeping a little bit more. Even the cat's enjoying it. I think also when we take in, like with the CPTSD, there's the initial like the ending of the marriage, going no contact with the family. It kind of feels like going through a war zone, and it's a very chaotic time, and perceptions of self are all over the place. And once you exit out of that, and it's kind of like a detoxing period where over time, where you're no longer around the abusive people, you start to detoxify. The toxicity that's being fed to you isn't present all the time, isn't there to tell you you have no confidence or your self-worth is completely crap, or you're dependent upon all these people, when it's more the other way around. It gets to a point where all the dust starts to settle, and it starts to quieten out a bit, and it starts to get a little bit more calmer. That's not to say that it's merely just a waiting period, because you can wait your whole life with the baggage still with you. So you need to unpack some of that baggage and down-regulate a lot of the nervous system that's just in a completely dysregulated state, because it's just been a survival state. It's like, what's the next battle that I need to fight? It gets to be to the point where things do start to settle, to start to calm, to get to calmer waters where it's no longer rough waters. So that's not to say that life is smooth sailing. It's just that you haven't got people trying to grab the steering wheel and control your life all the time. A little bit more easier when you know where you're going, by knowing of yourself, by starting to clear away those perceptions of what people had for you, and returning back to who you are as a person, which I guess is what they talk about as a recovery journey. I'll probably do this video a little bit in sections, and I also have notes, because I realize that not everyone's intuitive and not everyone can connect the dots. So a way to have somewhat of a concrete step approach is to have a dot system where I follow the bullet points and somewhat keep on track. Now, yeah, I did actually have some healing tips or perception tips, and probably the two are the same. I'll change tack here and talk about narcissism just for a little bit. There can be almost a fascination in a way with narcissism and narcissistic people and how they present. And definitely there's a lot of channels that will, including this one, that will put out content. For me, I have CPTSD because of narcissistic abuse, so therefore that's why I would talk about it, and also share EFT tapping videos to help you with that if you've gone through it. It's in a way kind of like the title of this playlist, Intuitive Digest. It's being careful of what we're consuming, and I think, like addictions, anything that it goes in an extreme can become a bit too much for our systems. And even knowing that if we're on the right track of what we're actually dealing with, is it narcissistic abuse that I'm actually dealing with? And I guess the more that we look into narcissism and people with NPD, is knowing what your end goal is in actually consuming of that content. What's the intention behind it? It becomes like with the news sort of thing. It's like a fear cycle sort of thing, or it jumps onto the latest catastrophe and just really rides that wave. And the more that you look at something that is bad, the more that you can feel bad, and the more that you seek out that, it becomes like a negative feedback loop. It's good to be educated in some degree about narcissism, but unless you're going to be a psychologist dealing with this and dealing with people that have dealt with that form of abuse or dealing with narcissistic people, I would probably moderate to a degree the amount of consumption towards dealing with this content of narcissism. But we also want to be looking at ourselves. We also want to be dealing with the effects of narcissistic abuse. There's no form of trying to get a rational answer to irrational actions. So the more that we're trying to find out why, we're losing the why of ourselves. Because why aren't we healing from the effects of narcissistic abuse? That's probably where we want to be a little bit educated as to, like, well, I can understand to some degree of why this person was this way, and also what that has as effect on myself. But we also want to be dealing with the effects of narcissistic abuse. We probably want to be on a scale, probably dealing a small percentage towards educating ourselves towards why this person was this way, and probably a great deal towards healing ourselves. And that's probably where we want to be putting most of our intention towards actually getting better from the abuse. And I think we need to give attention to our own healing needs. You can't actually heal from a car crash if you're constantly looking up the make and the model and the background history of the person that ran into you, rather than actually accepting the treatment of being in a car crash. You want to tend to your wounds, the trauma. So making sure that we're not going all in. I mean, they can be quite grandiose people. It's like they're probably enjoying the attention to some degree. But so that might be a case of not consuming too much of something that won't heal us in the end. The thing that will heal us is the therapy. And a lot with this channel is, yes, I've done videos and EFT tappings on narcissistic abuse, but you probably have to zoom out a little bit, because we can focus too much on the title and not also the other content that's on this channel. Because a lot of this content that's on this channel actually implicitly deals with narcissistic abuse. So it might not have the title of surviving narcissistic abuse, but it might have the title of insecurity. It might have the title of no confidence, empowering my self-worth, these sorts of things, where it's dealing with the effects of narcissistic abuse. It's dealing with you as a person rebuilding your life. So when we do look at what this channel has as its content, is dealing with the effects of narcissistic abuse, rather than going into giving the narcissist the attention and dealing with the psychology of their way of life. It's more healing your way of life from dealing with their way of life. Sorry. One of my clients is in an appointment. I'm not needed for 30 minutes, so we'll use this time to continue on my chat. So according to my little paperwork here, I was going to be talking a little bit about self-help, and also our perceptions of ourselves when it comes to self-help, its limitations, and I guess what we can actually view self-help as, because definitely in the online world it's marketed as these courses will be the thing that you overcome trauma, or this group, this support group will be the thing that helps you recover from your trauma. And in some ways these things are very beneficial to have in our lives. We need tools. Even EFT tapping is a tool to help down-regulate our nervous system. So when things become too stressful, when we have a very stressful response to something, it's also going to trigger probably past traumatic experiences that have its own stored stress. So down-regulating that will actually help down-regulate also the trauma. So when we do look at things that are more cognitive driven, where it's more doing courses as far as like filling out these steps, things more derived from neural linguistic programming, things that engage the cognitive mind rather than where the actual trauma is stored, then it's going to be very hard for the self that sees itself as a problem to actually help itself. So there's always going to be a limitation to what we see within our self-help to actually help ourselves. Even a surgeon will go to another surgeon to have surgical care. They won't tend to help themselves with their own surgery. Even within groups, there is, because I used to run groups back when I was working in a mental health organization, there's going to be that element where we can sit back and observe. It's good to know that there are other people like us out there. When we have a group mindset, that can be somewhat alluring on two parts. When we are isolated, when we feel like we are the only ones, it can be very affirming and almost accepting to be part of a group of the same affiliation towards something, whether it's CPTSD, whether it's your own football team, whether it's video games, whatever. We tend to, as social creatures, socialize towards something that we have a familiarity with, and in that we are associating our own personal experiences with CPTSD within a group to actually help support each other to get better. And there is that element where we can sit back and listen to someone else's story, but it also comes down to the part where you still need that individualized treatment. You still need to be able to have your voice in a safe space, which you may feel safe within a group, but there are some things that we're not even willing to admit to ourselves, let alone to a group of strangers, even if it is a supportive group. If you've ever had unfortunately, like a traumatic reaction to something, it tends to be one-on-one care that will actually help to balance you out, or having to go to hospital care to get that intensive care. So with these sorts of things, our perceptions of ourselves can actually be the things that limit our own self-help. And even when there's feelings around things like anger, which is a very justifiable emotion to unjustifiable actions that are done towards us. So, and anger can be that actually key to actually unlock things in a healthy sense, where we can actually start to experience some of the wrong that was done to us that we were told we weren't allowed to experience, that we should not show any form of defense after getting attacked. So where we can actually start to look at self-help as something that is beneficial is kind of in that scaffolding, building or rebuilding of our life, our recovery of ourselves. When we have a building, we have scaffolding that goes around it, can either help support or just be that supporting thing that goes around, so builders can build up the levels of from the foundation upwards. But eventually the scaffolding comes up so you can stand on your own 2 feet. And in some ways, having these self-help treatments is that thing, similar to brushing your teeth. You can brush your teeth all you like, but there's going to be that eventual point where you need that one-on-one treatment with a dentist to actually take care of the cavities. So there's going to be not an overall dependency needed upon self-help, but also having it as those things that can help regulate, help manage our day-to-day life. but we will still need that thing that will help us shift our perception of ourselves. That is a magpie. 2 magpies. Definitely when I've gone to therapy, unfortunately as a result of, fortunately or unfortunately, as a result of growing up in a household where they keep seeing you as the problem rather than dealing with their own problems, is I've gone to a lot of psychologists in my time. And in that psychologist sessions, or even with like my counselor, there's been many things that I've actually put upon my own shoulders as emotional baggage that I need to carry, which when in conversation with a therapist, they start to shift that perception and say, oh, actually, how you actually dealt with that was a normal reaction to things that were wrong, and you shouldn't have to carry that wrong perception of yourself. And in that reflecting, in that mirroring, in even that sounding board that resonates back to me, some of the words that I'm saying, some of my own self-beliefs, comes a new belief system or a new perception when what I'm told is actually measured up to what is probably more healthy behavior than unhealthy behavior. So where I'm seeing myself as all these bad things, it's in therapy reflected back to me that no, bad things are happening to you and you did your best to survive within that situation. And when you start to create that separation between what happened to you to how you survived, you start to see yourself in a different light. You don't sort of like, I guess, be so angry at oneself all the time for trying to be perfect and seeing that perfection as that way of like, well, if I'm perfect then I won't get hurt, because if I do everything right I won't be seen as wrong or do wrong to someone else that wants me to be perfect. So in that shifting of perception we get a new perception, but it's very hard to do when we're trying to do it for ourselves. We can look at a very attractive person can look in the mirror and see an ugly person staring back, because they're not seeing the superficial beauty, they're seeing all the ugly stuff that is happening on the inside. So in that sense, even things like with journaling, which is beneficial, it's just sometimes we can get into a negative feedback loop similar to listening to music all the time that's always negative. We self-perpetuate that own negative feeling about ourselves, or that own angry feeling, without any type of resolve. And trauma is kind of that thing where something's happened, it's alive and well because it hasn't found its resolution. It hasn't resolved within itself. It's continuing to resonate within our own, echoing about in our own mind. It's like an echo chamber of negative thoughts and belief systems about ourselves, that there is a part of ourselves that wants better for itself, but it's like getting overwhelmed by all this negativity that's been told to ourselves, probably from an external source. So we sometimes need that external source to reflect back to us that some of these things are actually not right to actually go through, and this is probably why you're not feeling right within yourself. And some of these things actually do need down regulation or some form of somatic experiencing to actually experience these feelings somatically. Somatic, it's kind of a tricky word to encapsulate. It can either mean cell, community, body sort of thing, but to express what has been suppressed within ourselves for so long, what we've had to hold on to of all these negative beliefs, can actually come through in a cathartic experience, whether it's crying, screaming, these sorts of things, where we release what is being held on to through some form of traumatic treatment. Because a lot of our reactions that we're having is on a unconscious, stored in the hippocampus and reacting through the amygdala. So to break that down is we've got a lot of stored memory. When something triggers it, amygdala is our fight, flight, freeze response. It goes to the old memory and we react. So we're wanting to discharge or down-regulate that reaction between the amygdala and the hippocampus, which actually starts to make us feel better in ourselves. And when we start to feel better in ourselves, we start to have a better self-perception of ourselves. Another way to look at it is you can't heal in the very environment that is making you sick. And when we start to move ourselves outside of that environment, we can actually have some space to start to heal, to start to see ourselves differently. Now, are you a glass half full person, or are you a glass half empty person? The question of are you a glass half full or glass half empty person really is a question, and the answer is a definition of how we perceive ourselves to be. I perceive myself to be a glass half empty person, but maybe down the track I might be a glass half full person. And when we go through a healing journey, generally when we heal something, it doesn't stay in the same state. When you heal a broken leg, you're hoping that it will get back to where you can use it again, not for it to continue to be a broken leg in the healing process. So our healing of our psychological and also physiological cells that have sustained this emotional trauma will also go through a period of change as it starts to down-regulate. As it might have just been up to here every time and just reactionary, it might start to create some space within itself because we're starting to down-regulate and balance out. Another way to look at the glass half full, glass half empty is that it's a glass that's found its balance and the space to reflect upon itself and to actually be able to have space for new experiences and new people in its life, which is what I feel I'm moving towards now. It's like I get to my weekend, I've got a busy week of supporting clients, but then I'm with myself, and I don't mind being by myself, but then the loneliness actually kicks in, and it's like, well, I kind of want to be with other people. I want to bring in new experiences that are more joyful and experiences that are meaningful to me. I need to be able to have space to take on these new experiences, which might create more optimism or less pessimism. And sometimes, like emotions, every emotion is valid. It doesn't mean that I'm not valid as a person by having the dominance of one particular emotion due to one particular reaction of a person. So when we come to things like anger can be quite destructive, but it can also be that warning sign that my self-defenses have been crossed. And I feel crossed because of that, but I'm not allowed to express that. So I start to get full up because my self-worth as a person and who I perceive myself to be is not being valued. So with everything, with anger, sadness, all these sorts of things, we don't want things into extremes. We want to start to level out. We start to want to bring back into balance, even positivity. The fact that we have to be determined to remain positive means that there might be something negative in our lives that we don't want to address. Positivity comes and goes, and we know the positivity by the sadness, the contrast. If we only had positivity, we wouldn't know it's positivity without the sadness or the bad moments. So it's good to laugh sometimes because sometimes bad things happen. So it's the opposite side of the coin. And sometimes when we start to go on this healing journey, we start to perceive ourselves in different ways of how we've been told to who we choose to be. So it's not a denial of what we were told. It's through that healing change, perhaps with a therapist, that we start to reflect upon our lives and see that we were in a survival response rather than an actual harmonious living experience within an environment that's conducive to bringing up life rather than cutting it down. So through seeing a different person, we might actually be able to see ourselves in a different light rather than the external environment adding their crap to it and saying, you didn't do better, you weren't good enough. And that's just someone else adding their crap to your cup, and you don't need that. They've got their cup to manage, and they should be managing it. It's not your responsibility to manage someone else's cup. One perception of myself that constantly tends to happen is that my age, I get sort of told that I'm a lot younger than I am.
happened just recently. I was supporting a client at an art group, and the art group lady was talking about in Brisbane there was this thing called Expo 88, convention that happened in 1988. And they were talking about the events. There was all these rides there, and it sounded really great. It sounded like something that I would have liked to have been to, because according to the perception of the art group, I was too young to know about that at that stage. Now, we moved to Brisbane from Sydney. I'm originally from New Zealand, and how I know when we arrived in Brisbane was Expo 88. I was alive then. And Expo 88 was just getting finished, and we could see it from our hotel, and we visited. It was quite a good event. And of this, come October, I'll be 3 years from being 50. So people's perceptions of you will be different to the reality of what you have been through, who you are as a person, your age, what you identify with currently, and what you'll identify with in the future, because things change, as they should. So things change over time, and people's perceptions of you sometimes don't update, and sometimes they will stay the same. And some people will stay the same if they don't choose to change, and they want things to change for them and people to take care of them for them, and do the healing for them. Unfortunately, it just gets it improves in bitterness. But holding yourself to other people's perceptions of what they view you as might not be who you are. And whether you should live your life to other people's perceptions will always keep you captive, because they don't actually know who you are. So it's a losing battle. So reconnecting to who we are sometimes does mean going through and pulling out once again all that crap, so we have the space to reflect upon who we are as a person and what we value. Taking away all the devaluing stuff and getting back to the source of things, and feeling comfortable within ourselves.
And yet another way to look at it, with the glass half empty, glass half full, we can start to have that space to take on other things in our life that bring us quality, that bring us something that we value, rather than something that kind of feels like we're always having our cup filled up with toxicity. So for me, definitely, because I do a lot of support work, so I'm dealing with both mental health and disability support, and within the EFT, and even within my own recovery, as I was saying with the narcissistic abuse content, that if you're constantly viewing that, it's kind of like a news cycle. You're just going in and in and in, rather than dealing with the abuse that is being sustained from it, so healing it. So sometimes it is good just to have space to not be fully in the deep end of the consuming of content around that, or even constantly having to heal ourselves. It's kind of like that you can't sort of like push a tree to grow. It's like no amount of dumping fertilizer on it every day in the hope that it will grow quicker will actually help it grow. You've kind of got to tend to it and allow it the space to actually start to take root and start to develop a new form of life. And the same thing for even trauma recovery. Even with EFT tapping, it's normally 2 days after or any form of trauma work. You kind of got to have that integration process. You got to let things settle and integrate into your nervous system and in your mind. So the perceptions of what we saw of ourselves, we start to form a different perception for ourselves as we settle into not being so reactive to all these different things that we had to be on guard for a very volatile person that was in our life. We start to feel a little bit calmer, a little bit more safer, and a little bit more harmonized and balanced, and the space to take on other things. And sometimes it's better to do something that is not even involving your healing as far as like it's a healthy activity. But like if I was always having to do EFT tapping content, or if I was always having to talk about narcissism and all that, it'll get a little bit too much because it's starting to consume my life. I need to balance it out by doing things that are fun, things that are enjoyable, because we don't want to spend our life as like a hospital ward. We don't want to always be in therapy. We want to have the therapy to actually address our symptoms, but we also want to have the freedom to enjoy our life. And definitely, if you're constantly having to mend a wound, it's either the wound is not mending or that we're constantly picking at it. we need to let it to take care of itself. So taking care of ourselves can be doing things that are not involving having to focus so heavily on healing. Our choice of language even, not everyone's going to adhere to our therapy language, so it's knowing that we still have to integrate into a community, and hopefully that the treatment that we've done has also allowed us to be a part of a community that will never fully understand us, but hopefully will accept us because we're no longer hiding away from it in that protection. The different perceptions that we'll go through, the different healings that we'll go through, and allowing space to be ourselves and this new sense of self will actually change and will reflect upon our lives a little bit differently. And people will be stuck in that perception of who we should be, but we can never live our life in the perception of what people want us to be, because sometimes they don't even know themselves. So it's healing for yourself, finding the space for yourself, and taking on new things in life, having that space. If you're constantly overthinking, it's very hard to resolve something by thinking about more things. Sometimes it's doing the opposite of involving something that doesn't require thought or doesn't require such pushing of ourselves, because that might just mean that, you know, there might be still things to address, and it's whether the treatment that we're having is actually addressing those root causes of things. So I'll leave it there. I'm Dion from Eflowtion Support Services, and I offer EFT tapping to help reduce, recover, and regulate your nervous system and help stress go with the flow. So check out eflowtionsupportservices.com. I'm off to support another client, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.